Hello everyone, and welcome to your 61st Cocoa programming tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be covering how you can make your own login items for your Cocoa applications. So a login item, quite simply, is the ability to launch your Mac app when you log into your account. So for example, I have Dropbox and 1Password. These are two applications that I use all the time, and I've set them up as login items so that they launch as soon as I log into my system. And the way these two applications handle this is actually quite different. So I just want to show you this before I dive into this tutorial. So you'll notice with Dropbox, it actually registers itself in your users and groups for your system preferences. Under login items, you'll see that Dropbox adds itself here. And if I play around with the Dropbox settings, you can see that I can enable and disable that option. Now, 1Password, even though it is a login item, does not appear under the login items section, and probably no Mac App Store applications actually would appear down here if you had some. So this is interesting to note that even though it can be a login item, it doesn't actually appear, or doesn't have to appear, under the login items section under system preferences. So this is something to note, and our application will not appear under this login items section. So useful to know. Alright, so what we're going to do is an approach that works for the Mac App Store, and it will work outside of it. So we're doing the 1Password approach basically to doing this. I mean, of course, I don't know if this is how 1Password necessarily does it, but it's a way that you can achieve the same result. So this is we're going to call this lesson 61, and I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to save this to my Cocoa Programming tutorials folder. Once I've gone ahead and created that, I'm actually going to add a new project. So I'm going to create a new Cocoa application again. This one's going to be the lesson 61 helper. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And I'm going to hit next, and then going to, before I create this, add it to an existing project, which is lesson 61, the project that I just created. So hit create now, and you'll see that you get basically lesson 61 and then this sort of sub project, which is lesson 61 helper. And I'm just going to drag this guy to the bottom, so sort of differentiate the two. But the helper application's job is to basically, it's not going to be part of the main app. The only job is really to be like a login item. So the helper application's job is to simply launch your main application and then quit itself. That's the only job of this helper app. The lesson 61 project is, your main application. This is where you build all the cool stuff that you want to put into your app. Alright, so what we got to do is set a lot of stuff up here, so I'm just going to run you through it now. We're going to go under the target for lesson 61 and just start setting stuff up. So we want to set up the Mac App Store, log in, so the team is myself, and we need to add a framework. So the framework that I want to add is the Service Management Framework. And so there we go. We just add that to the linked frameworks. We need to add app sandboxing, because if we want to be in the Mac App Store, we need that on. Under build settings, we want to join the strip club. No, actually, we want to just strip some debug symbols, so we can type in strip debug and hit no. So all this is really doing, well, I really don't know what it's doing, to be honest, but the only reason I'm doing this is because if you go to archive this application and you have this not selected, or if you have this set to yes for the release, then it will actually complain about this particular thing, and so I will fix that by changing that to no. Alright, under the build phases, this is where we are going to include the helper application into our project. So we want to add a new build phase. We just hit the little plus button there, and we want to copy files into our application. So we're going to go copy files. Destination is going to be the wrapper. The subpath we're going to save this to is content/library/login items. And this is just an arbitrary path that we've pretty much set up for this to work. You know, that's what we're going to use. Then we can add this item. So we're just going to hit add. And we want to add, this is very important that you add the right thing. We want to add the 61 helper. So make sure you're actually adding the helper app into this project. All right, so hit add on that. And there we go. So what we're doing with this is we're just saying that inside of our contents for our main application, we're going to copy this application into this directory. And I'll show you where this is located in just a bit, but just remember that we're doing this for now. All right, so that's everything in the Lesson 61 section. Let's hop over to the helper and just select its target as well. We want to, of course, do some of the same stuff. So Mac App Store, My Team. We don't need to add the framework in this case. We want to be app sandboxed. Inside of our info plist, we want to actually add a new row. And we want to be an application that is in the background only. So we're going to say application is background only. And then we want to set this to be yes. If you don't have this enabled, I believe that you could not enable this to be a login item, as far as I know. So I'm pretty sure this is like the real difference with login items. But, you know, feel free to play around with it if you want. Alright, so once we have that, we need to go to the build settings for one last thing, and this is to go to the skip install section and set this to yes. The only reason we're doing this is, well, kind of the same reason we did the last one. Skip install, this will yell at you if you go to product and then archive, which we'll be doing later to actually create this application. So yeah, we need to set this to yes. I believe all this really deals with is the two bundles. So because there's two applications in the same project, by saying skip install to yes, you're basically telling the project really which application is the main application. So that would be this guy here. I'm not really sure if that's what it does, so you know, don't quote me on it, but it'll yell at you if you leave this as no. All right, so that's everything that we need to do to, you know, set that up with some preferences. We can go into our helper app here now, and I'm going to go to the main menu nib and just delete all the user interface stuff because I just don't need it. In the app delegates section, I'm going to set up our app. So how do we set this up? Well, there's three things that we have to do. We get the path of the main application that we're going to launch, then we launch it, then we kill ourselves, figuratively, but well, I guess sort of literally too. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. We just have to get the path of the main application. So how this is all going to work in the grand scheme of things is our main application will tell, you know, the service management framework that we want to have the helper as a login item. The helper will be launched when we log in. Its job is to launch the main application. So kind of a roundabout thing, but it's what you got to do. All right, so let's go ahead and type some things in here. So this is going to be the path to the main application. We can get this path by asking NSBundle's main bundle for the bundle path. And the bundle path is where this application is going to be located. So the helper app itself, the bundle path is where this application is located. Now, where is this application located? Well, we can find this out by going to our product. So if we right-click on our Lesson 61 app and hit Show in Finder, you'll see where this app is actually located. More importantly, though, is if we right-click it and hit Show Package Contents, you'll see that there's a contents folder that contains the library and the login items. And this is what we just set up, right? We just set up this path to have the helper inside this path, right? That's what we did with the copy files thing that we just did a little while ago. All right, so what we're trying to do is find the path of the main application. So when we get the bundles path, we are pointing to this guy. This guy will be the bundle path. What we want to do is go 4 directories back to where the main application is located. So we're going 1, 2, 3 directories back, and then one more to get to where we have Lesson 61. Again, this is our main application. So to do that, we can just say string by deleting last path component. And if you kind of guessed it, we just do this 4 times. Kind of seems ridiculous, but it's what you gotta do. All right. Once we have that, we can just tell the app to launch using the NS Workspace class. You can get the shared workspace, call launch application, pass in the path, and that will launch our main application. Then, of course, we're just, got to kill ourselves. So terminate nil. And there you go. So that is the job of the helper app. It's got a pretty sad life, I guess. But that's it. So once you've done that, you're pretty much good to go. All right, now let's head over to our main application because we do indeed need to enable this to happen. So by default, just because we have a helper application doesn't mean it's going to be a login item. So we actually have to enable this to be a feature. So usually you would have a preference pane in your application that would have something like login item enabled or something like that, basically telling the user that we want this to be enabled. And you probably wouldn't call it login item because that's kind of a nerdy term, but you would call it some informative text. And then let's just make this app really fancy and throw in a label, and there we go. So this is going to be our lesson 61 window that pops up when we run our app. Now this checkbox is very important because it's going to enable or disable our helper app from being a login item. So let's go to our assistant editor here, and we're going to just set all this stuff up in our app delegate. So I'm going to control drag from this particular guy into here, and we're going to say login item pressed. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but that's what I'm calling it. All right, there we go. So that's all we have for that. Now let me just flip over to the normal section here. One last thing is I'm going to set this to be off to start. So state to be off. And again, a Mac App Store requirement is that the user has to enable this option. So you cannot have a login item on by default. Somebody actually has to set this checkbox to be on, or basically has to enable the ability to have a login item. All right, so once we have that, we need to just implement login item pressed. So first off, we want to import the service management header. So just do that. And there's a method on the service management header called sm login item set enabled. And we're putting this in an if statement because we basically just want to check to see if this is successful. So this method will set up a particular app basically to be enabled as a login item. If this is not successful, that's why we're going to put the exclamation mark in there, then we will print out that basically the login item was not successful. All right, just like that. Okay, so now we just have to basically say what we want to start up as a login item and whether it is going to be on or off as a login item. So we want to pass in the name of the actual helper, which is the bundle URL, or the bundle identifier rather. And this is the bundle identifier right there. So that whole thing, including the lesson 61 helper, is going to be the bundle identifier for our helper application. And this is what we want to enable for our login item. So we say com.lucasdera and we just had that as lesson 61-helper. There you go. And we actually need to cast this because this was a CF string ref. So we do the standard __ bridge CF string ref, and that'll just get it as a CF string ref. That's just a core foundation string. And then we just need to say whether this is enabled or not. So obviously if it's yes, then that means we will have a login item. If not, we will not. I'm going to just switch our type for the sender to be an NS button, just because that's what it's going to be. The checkbox is an NS button. And we're just going to say sender state. And we'll cast this to be a bool just to kind of emphasize that it is. All right, so that is everything, and that's all you got to do. So we have our login item, we're basically saying enable this particular application as a login item. The state basically depends on whatever the checkbox is. So if it's on, we will enable the item. If it's off, we will turn it off. So that's that. Now, usually you would want to have this in NS user defaults though. So, you'd want to go into something like NS user defaults, shared or standard user defaults, and then you'd want to set up some kind of object for key. So anytime you change this preference, right? I mean, this just has to do with preference panels. You want to be able to save these preferences somehow. So you want to be able to store this guy in NS user defaults. I'm not going to walk through that in this tutorial just because it's long enough as it is, but you can check out my NS user defaults tutorial if you don't know how to work with NS user defaults. All right, so yeah, we're done now. That's all we have to do. So the last step though is to actually put this into our applications folder, because it's not it's tricky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think if it's a Mac App Store app, you need to have the application in the Mac app, or in your applications folder rather, for it to work. So let's go ahead and just archive this and do the work. So we'll hit archive, so product archive. This is how you make an actual app to submit to the Mac App Store, just FYI. Then we want to hit distribute, and we want to export it as a application. And then I don't care about re-signing for right now. And I'm just going to put this in our applications folder. So find your applications folder, save it as L61, and boom, just like that, we have our application. So what I can do is I can now, I'm free to quit Xcode. I'm just going to do that. And I will go into here. So this is just, Launchpad. I'm going to launch my L61 that I just created. And I'm going to enable it. Woohoo! And you'll notice that, hopefully it actually worked. We should have checked that in Xcode to make sure that the nslog actually was successful. So if this failed, you would have a log in the console to actually see that this was broken. So you should test this in Xcode, but anyway, we're jumping ahead. So go ahead and enable it. Once you've enabled it, you can quit the application and log out, and then log back in. So I'm just going to go to Apple, log out, and I'm going to log back in, and then we'll see if it was successful, and then I'll close out the tutorial. And there we go. When we log back in, we can see that our L61 application does launch automatically without us actually needing to open it. So hopefully this was all good and successful for you. If not, you can feel free to run through the tutorial again. Source code will be up on GitHub whenever I do get it up there. And of course, you should use NS user defaults for this example. I just didn't want to do it for the sake of time. And just save the bool value as an NS number, and then you can just load it back in application did finish launching, or whenever you load the preference panel, for example. So that is what you'd want to do for your checkbox. But that's all you have to do. So hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial, and I'll see you in a future tutorial as well. See you then.